But we really appreciate everybody being here. We are, it seems, spread across Australia, the west coast of the U.S., the east coast of the U.S., and all parts in between. So thank you, Mark, for joining from Australia. I know, Ryan, you're on the west coast, Jay Bronstein. So thanks for joining. And those I don't know personally, I look forward to hearing more from you during the Q&A session that we'll have. So I'm going to introduce Jordan briefly. I'm going to introduce Zach. And then, Zach, you can kick it off really with some kind of questions and, get the discussion going. But real briefly, Jordan Maraskin's my partner at deCervo for the last, almost 6 years. It's been quite a journey we've been on. We've been scanning baseball players' brains, major league, minor league, youth players, college, high school. Got it into softball recently, and that's really exciting to see the impact there. Jordan's responsible for all of our technical operations at uHIT. So anything related to new development, anything we're doing to bring the next generation of decision training into baseball and softball, Jordan's really spearheading that. I mean, I tell him I'd like it to do this, and he goes, well, that's possible or it's not. So that's kind of how it works on our end. And then Zach Schonbrun, for many of you, needs no introduction, but for some of you, maybe. When we met Zach, he was a New York Times sports writer on the side, but also really just a great writer in general. And he was working for New York Times sports section amongst a few other outlets. Now he's with The Weekly, I think. And I'm going to take Zach off mute here. I know that's a function your wife would love to have, right? Just put it on mute. So that's Zach Schonbrun there. We met him back in 2015 when he wrote an article for a now defunct version of SB Nation. I don't even if SB Nation's still around, but it was a phenomenal piece that landed him a book deal with Dutton Books to write a book on these strange guys from Columbia University who were scanning baseball players' brains amongst other people in this world of sports and vision and cognitive performance. And so we spent a lot of time with Zach. We ate some barbecue along the way, and many other strange meals in Brooklyn while he was interviewing me and interviewing Jordan and stuff like that. So Zach Schonbrun, everybody. Performance Cortex came out 2 years ago, and we'll have some more info about how you can get Performance Cortex a little bit later on. But Zach, carry it away.
Well, thanks, Jason. It's always good to see you and Jordan, and thank you everybody for coming to this. It's a strange time for sure to be talking about baseball and softball, but I know Jason and Jordan have been hard at work throughout this pandemic, and so hopefully we'll start seeing some games soon. That'll be great.
Yeah.
As Jason mentioned, I met you, probably about 5 years ago, around now, I guess. I don't really remember the time of year, but you guys were still, at Columbia or finishing up at Columbia. You were working out of a little startup incubator space owned by Columbia. You didn't have uHIT. You didn't have the polo shirts. I don't even think you were deCervo at that point. This was pre-deCervo. So it's been a while, and it's really cool to see how you guys have come along in this time. And one thing that always sticks out to me when I think back to those early days meeting with you and speaking with you about what you were doing is, you were still interested in this question of, this very basic of what makes a great hitter. And, baseball at its simplest comes down to a very straightforward interaction on every pitch. Do you swing or do you not swing? Swing, don't swing. It's a binary interaction that happens on every pitch. And, you guys were interested in using your neuroscience backgrounds to try and understand, what makes that decision happen. And From there, can you differentiate and quantify players based on how quickly they come to that decision? And that's a question that I think you're still trying to understand, trying to answer. But it's a very important question, and I always appreciate. Obviously, I wrote a book largely because of the work that you were doing, but it's still something that I always think about every time I see a baseball game is what's going on underneath that helmet of these players, and can we get to a better understanding of what separates these guys from you or I? So what I want to know is, in the 5 years since we started talking to each other, first of all, how has the receptiveness of teams and the coaching staffs and the players that you consult with and you work with, how has their receptiveness to what you're doing changed?
Yeah.
And more broadly, how has baseball's overall receptiveness to, or baseball's approach of understanding what role the brain plays in the skill that we see on the field, how has that changed in the last 5 years?
Yeah, I'll touch on the what the reception part has been like, because that's really become the engineering problem as I see it. And I think I'll punt to Jordan on more of the what have we learned even since 4 or 5 years ago part, because in that time we've continued to do research with the Army on how the brain makes these types of quick decisions, and the type of data we've collected in baseball has been instrumental to accelerating that understanding. But starting off with the reception part, I think that's really something that we've learned a lot about over the last 4 or 5 years. Is when you wrote the article on us in 2015, and I think first contacted us in the fall of 2014, we had already had a little bit of press out there, from Boston Globe to Wall Street Journal, trying to cover what's going on with these guys who are putting EEG caps and measuring brain activity of players to find out how they decide on pitches, right? So we were kind of, I think, like this novelty item, right? And we were in the Boston Globe in February 2014, February 2015, and Gabe Kapler at the time was director of player development at the Dodgers, now manager for the Giants. He said, I want you guys to come here. I want you to do your brain scan stuff, right? And there were a few other kind of things like that happened. I think there was kind of this pizzazz of, wow, they're analyzing the brain, and they are telling you how these players are deciding on pitches, and they're going to make them better. And that next step of, and they're going to make them better, was something that we weren't really prepared for in terms of a product, right? I think as scientists, Jordan and I, coming out of Columbia in biomedical engineering, I come from a physics and aerospace engineering background. Jordan's through and through biomedical. And we met at the intersection of him doing his PhD and me doing my postdoc. We had uHIT. We didn't even have uHIT. We didn't even have deCervo as the name of a company yet. But we had a way of measuring how the brains of hitters were deciding, this is a strike, this is not a strike. This is a curveball, this is not a curveball. And that was something that was appealing at the time to Gabe Kapler, to Chris Antonetti, to Mike Chernoff from the GM of the Indians, to many others, right? But in terms of making it operational for real players, there was still a lot of work that we had to do. And those early figures, Gabe, Mike, Chris, many others along the way, in the Cardinals organization, the Reds organization. You cover someone in the book who's known as Frank from the Reds. We'll leave him anonymous for now. But, you know, he was also really instrumental in helping us understand how to make uHIT what it is now in terms of its ability to assess what players can do, how they're making decisions, and then that next step of how to make them better, right? How to make a customized training program that they can then follow. And so the reception from professional teams is something that's been different from professional players. And then that's something that's even more different from the reception from youth players, from college players, from high school players. And so we figured out that we could really broaden this out in terms of applicability by going directly to players. Because one thing we noticed happening is that even though some teams were receptive to it, they weren't receptive enough in terms of how they implemented it. And one of the things that we saw happen was that there is a little bit of a trust gap between the teams and the players themselves. And when it comes to data, there are some privacy concerns that the players have, where if that data is being stored by the team, they are concerned and their agents are concerned that that information can be used against them. And so we saw that this was a problem in terms of how we can make them hit better, right? Because if we can't measure, then we can't make them better, right? It's assessment and training, right? And so what we figured out was, let's just go off of the players we've already connected to, and let's directly go to them and provide them with training where we use artificial intelligence applied to our data that we collect to help make them better in a customized fashion. And that's been wildly successful since we've started doing that really on a direct basis this past fall. So we kind of piloted that over this past fall as we started seeing the problems that some of the teams were having implementing this. Even some high school and college teams were having implementing this. And that started to really connect the dots for people about how these guys who are scanning brains, right, can actually use that data with the assistance of artificial intelligence and other methods to make a customized training program that at the end of the day translates into hitting it harder, not swinging at bad pitches, and hitting it farther, right? And so those are really the key things that we've done, I'd say, in those last 5-6 years that have translated to teams responding better, players responding better, and not just at professional, but also at amateur, college, high school, youth, and now across both sports, baseball and softball. So I'll kick it over now to Jordan to talk a little bit more about some of the new techniques that we have, you know, the new insights we've found really as we've more gotten into the research side, less so on the product and, you know, how it meets the need side. And I think Jordan, yeah, okay, yeah.
Hey guys, thanks for all that, Jason. Good to see you, Zach.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for some of the stuff that's sort of on the research side, not most of the stuff that's going on there is stuff you actually don't get to see in the app. It's all on the background. And part of that is trying to understand what makes one pitch easier than another pitch, or what makes one pitch harder than another. Now, a lot of batters can discuss that, and a lot of coaches can try and train a really difficult late breaking pitch and a much faster pitch. Like, those are the easiest two components you can have about a very difficult pitch. If it's really fast and it breaks a lot, especially if it breaks late. And sort of what we've been doing is not the extremes where, you know, 100 miles an hour pitch is really tough to hit, but those standard, you know, at the lower levels where you're not seeing 100 miles an hour, what makes one pitch a little bit harder than another pitch? And we've been digging into the data because we've had millions and millions of pitches in our database that we've had decisions being made on. And what we've been doing is taking that data and trying to learn what makes one pitch a little bit more difficult than another pitch, and how can we use that information to then train our players on harder pitches based on their ability to see these pitches. So when we do our training, we don't want to start you off at the hardest level possible, because you're not going to train that well. It's going to be out of your ability to do the task, and so you're not going to get any better. So part of what we've been learning is getting a baseline assessment of our players when they come in, and then using all that data that we've collected on the back end to then target, okay, this is your level, so we're going to show you pitches at this difficulty. And then as they continue to play, we raise that difficulty of pitches in the background without the players even noticing it. So part of what we're doing is just trying to get you better without even you realizing we're making stuff harder. Therefore, you're training a little bit better. You're training up on more difficult pitches, more faster speeds, late breaks. We're targeting your zones that, let's say, your inner half, you're not doing as well as your outer half. We'll start targeting that inner half. And so our AI on the background has learned some of this stuff so that when you do, a couple pitches, a couple sessions in the beginning, the more you train, the more we could target your weaknesses so that you get better all around. And that's some of the stuff we've really been working hard at, so that the more you train, it's more efficient. And so the time in the app gets really put together so you get better on the field.
So when I met you guys, your system was so rudimentary. The simulation, I mean, it made Frogger look advanced, right? It was just a little dot, that represented the pitch on your screen, and it kind of exploded toward you as the hitter and moved a little bit. And, that was your indication whether or not it was going to be a strike or a ball and whether to swing or not swing. And it worked, but obviously you guys have significantly enhanced your graphics and, your product. Now,
yeah, I might add, and our polo shirts.
And your polo shirts, yeah. And so you've gamified it. What's the benefit in gamifying it from a neural perspective, from your neuroscientist? Tell me what do the hitters get out of it differently, better for them, being able to see a background, a real pitch coming toward them, things like that. And then the next question is, can you advance that to the point, or are you trying to advance it to the point where you can actually get, simulations of pitchers, on the mound throwing pitches, so you can actually feel like you're facing, a Max Scherzer on the mound and really replicate in that way. So, kind of two questions there.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think, you don't have a neuroscience experiment if you don't have a neuro to analyze, right? And so the reason I say that is because one of the keys from a neuroscience perspective and from a product utility perspective is that people want to use it. And the more people use uHIT, the more precise we can make our training protocols off of, how you're doing on it. And so the gamification, so to speak, the enhanced graphics, we do have a pitcher's wind up and release in the baseball app for the last year, which has been hugely popular, have all accelerated the comfort level, I think, out of the gate that people have when they download the app and they just want to try it out, or when they are doing our more immersive simulated at bat at a flat screen TV, because it's a comfort level thing as a hitter to see a windup and a release from a pitcher. The dot that shrinks and then the ball comes out was really jarring for a lot of people in baseball. I remember Alan Zinter is the hitting coordinator at the on the minor league level at the Giants, and we're in the spring training facility there 2 years ago, and he says, "Why is the ball coming out of center field?" Like coming out of the center field wall, and so it was like this jarring effect. And he was, one of at that point hundreds of people who had seen uHIT. Now we have 55,000 plus users of baseball and softball, where we saw the most growth really over the last year, where you had a ton of people download it and keep using it. Particularly, I've been told by last Zoom seminar we had Bruce Yari, who's been with the Reds organization the last few years. Zach, you may have even met him when you came to Arizona and followed our work there in 2016 with the Reds. And he particularly pointed out the pitcher as a big deal for him. Eric Thames emailed us last year about it because he actually liked the dot that shrunk and the ball came out, right? So we made sure that there was a switch in there. I kind of refer to it as the Thames switch, so that he can have the dot and other people can have the wind up and release. And it's something that, you know, we're hoping to integrate at some point into softball to have that kind of comfort level again of seeing the wind up and release. But we haven't yet gotten to it when there are so many other ways that we know we can help hitters now. But that's really been one big thing that has accelerated the neuroscience piece, is that with that added level of comfort, you get a lot more people wanting to use it and getting benefit out of it.
So are you still, I ask you this every time that I see you, Jason, but are you, I haven't seen you in a while. Are you guys still, you know, doing the head caps, the EEG, you know, the whole neural assessment with players? Is that still part of the package that you're offering, and how's that been going?
Yeah, well, you know, interestingly, I think before we got on and we were, you know, rapping a little bit on this, I was kind of, you know, bearish on it. But actually, strangely enough, is that as we've really formalized uHIT into this assessment and then AI training kind of loop, and then it's a reassessment where your training is based off of what you keep doing. We've found a new, I think, demand for the EEG measurements in terms of getting that deeper level of assessment before you go into your training. Because really what we're trying to do with the assessment and training loop is to get you to get you to your maximum in terms of your potential in strike zone recognition and in pitch recognition. And if we have the neural data, we can actually reach that maximum faster. Rather than going like this that takes longer, we can actually get to that maximum faster because we know more about your decision making. And so actually one of the KBO teams, the Korean baseball teams, they got EEGs for all of their major league players and all of their minor league players. Now, that's not, 7 or 9 or 8 teams affiliated in one major league team like in the majors. They've got one major league team, one minor league team, but it was about 45 players, that we had to do EEG with. Now, and then you've also seen that has become an attractive option for high performance training academies that are serving high school age and college age players. So the Diamond Edge Performance is a facility in Maryland, kind of a Silver Spring area of Maryland. And they got EEG assessments to start their AI training for some of their really top level players. So I see a couple questions rolling in, and we'll definitely get to those in a second. But just wrapping up that point, those EEG assessments versus the mobile assessment, in other words, the assessment that we do just, right on a phone, right, have become a way of really operationalizing the neuroscience part, right? Before it was like kind of nice to have, and I don't really know how I use this data. But now though, we provide the EEG assessment as an entree to your AI training. And that is a way of accelerating your rate of performance increase. And it's been, really instrumental, I think, in analyzing a few issues with our professional players just as much as it's been with our youth players. Now, that's all with the caveat of the fact that right now we're in the coronavirus strange universe, right? Where to go in person and put a cap on somebody and do the thing and all that stuff, we have it on hold. And we actually had to put half of the players that we did with our KBO team, the Hanway Eagles, we had to put half of them on hold and do the assessment via mobile, because we were able to do in spring training half of them, but the other half were going to be in Korea, and then everything shut down. So we had to switch to being able to assess the remaining 30 players or so using just a mobile phone, and then develop their customized training from there. But that's something that's great about uHIT, right? It's something that gives you that really sophisticated detail that no other company, really no other science lab in the world, maybe save a few, could actually do, but really the ability to operationalize that into your training. But then if you run into a problem where, hey, there's a global pandemic and we can't actually see people in person, you can just send it right on the phone and the assessment is done in less than 20 minutes.
You guys have been able to stay active throughout this pandemic. I know you're based in New York, and with throughout all the lockdowns, Jason and Jordan, you guys have maintained connections and relationships with players who are training and so on throughout all this.
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually been a I think a change in attention for a lot of people to do things like this. Like, we hadn't really done seminars like this until we saw that the attention was shifting very quickly to this kind of format. And even though we're about a dozen people on tonight, I regularly see 100 views or so within the first week of us putting these videos up, because they're so helpful to people who are trying to train remotely, and really trying to utilize this time for furthering their game in ways that many others aren't. I mean, we saw with the Major League Baseball season, it being curtailed, and now they have this provisional season being planned with a few question marks in the air, but it's really something that a lot of players have leaned on, as their organizations have in some cases really abandoned them, and we've really cherished the opportunity to jump in on that, right? Because just like with an agent, our goal is to make the player better. It's a little different than when we were working with the teams, where we were kind of a vendor to them and they kind of did what they wanted with the data. Our goal is to make the players better, and the players have really respected that and stepped up to that common interest. So Jared Oliva and the Pirates organization, Dylan Thomas, I think, in the Cardinals. You've got Andy Young, who was in the Cardinals. He was traded to the Diamondbacks for Paul Goldschmidt, along with two other players. These are all players, Cole Sturgeon and the Red Sox organization. These are all players, and many more, who have continued to use uHIT in lieu of their organizations not being able to provide them the same kind of training that they did when they were functioning normally in the pre-COVID world. So we've really been able to, I think, fill that void, and it's been a real opportunity to help a different approach to seeing and hitting better get out there and reach more people as they start seeing the results on field a lot more. I get text messages all the time from parents, random parents, who, we first met at a convention, and their daughter is playing softball, and she's, pre-high school age, and she's doing our AI training. And then the first pitcher that she sees of the season is a college pitcher, and he sends me a slow motion video of her seeing the pitch come into the strike zone. This is from the side, and then it dropped. She's just about to start and swing on it, and then she stops her swing and lets it go by. And that, he said, that's the kind of confidence she never had before. And he saw it with his own eyes, and he couldn't believe it, right? And so he filmed like the next pitch, and she did it again. And so that's the kind of connection that we've been able to really, I think, foster in this, bizarro world that we're in of social distancing and other things like that. When you have a digital technology like uHIT, you can actually simulate all of these aspects of hitting and the decision making that's involved to really make a difference when you do go back out on the field. And that's really the big point of, of where things are now that, they may not have been about 4 or 5 years ago when you were covering us first.
Yeah. So,
and I will say, Zach, I do have a question here to the chat.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Jason, you go ahead and ask it.
Okay, yeah, I'll just read it out here, and then we can pivot back. I just wanted to make sure. This is Warren Modlin's question. Have you explored the training in a less sport-specific environment and train more fundamental cognitive skills? So the short answer is no, and I'll explain a little bit more about why. And I think Warren was coming from more of a fundamental cognitive skills background at NDV Performance. And really for us, it's based on the research that Jordan and I did when we were back at Columbia, me as a postdoc, him as a PhD student, where we read quite a few papers that measured fundamental cognitive skills of various kinds. And yes, they can represent certain aspects of what translates to when you are out on the field, right? Or when you're on the rink playing hockey, or when you're on the pitch doing soccer, right? You can measure skills that apply to those various environments. But one thing that we really started our hypothesis on a scientific level, really started our hypothesis from the perspective of we're not doing sports at all. We're actually looking at how totally different scenario. Musicians' brains work when they are listening to their instrument being played or somebody else's instrument being played, right? And how the brain works when you are making decisions about that thing you're listening to. And what we found from that was that it's really about expertise in terms of how things related to that expertise stimulate your brain. So if you're a musician, it's about listening to music. If you're a baseball hitter, it's about seeing baseball pitches. If you're a softball hitter, it's about seeing softball pitches. It's not just a gimmick that we just slapped a new logo on uHIT softball, and it's a totally, and it's the same thing as uHIT baseball. It's not just that the background is, it's a grass infield versus a dirt infield. Although Matt Lyle from Fresno State said, hey, you know what, you better get that green out of the infield. You don't have that in softball. Of course, we didn't know that at the time. It's not just branding. It's that the brain of softball hitters learns a different dictionary of pitches than the brain of baseball hitters. And the trajectory of underhand pitching is totally different than the trajectories of overhand pitching. And so those are sports specific, even to the type of sport specific environments, but there may be some fundamental cognitive skills that are shared too between baseball hitters and softball hitters. But if we measure Barry Bonds and say he's got all these baseball fundamental cognitive skills, and then we put him against Jenny Finch, he's going to miss. And he did miss a lot. And so that's really kind of our scientific basis for how we approach things, where we don't do kind of like fundamental cognitive skills, so to speak. What we do is we analyze what are the specifics to a particular environment's decision making. Baseball, it's pitches. Softball, it's pitches underhand, right? But the reason we're able to then go into training hockey officials for the NHL or training police officers in New York City Police, whatever it is because we analyze what is appropriate to that environment, and then we measure what's going on in the brain and the nervous system that helps us assess how you're acting in that environment. And then from there, we make customized training to make you better at acting in that environment. So that's really what uHIT is doing with AI training. It starts with the assessment, but the assessment of baseball is going to be totally different than the assessment of softball, because the way you're stimulating the nervous system is completely different. So yeah, there's going to be some overlap, but there will be some really fundamental differences. And the best example of that is Jenny Finch against Barry Bonds. It's no contest. So thanks. That's a good question, Warren. I really appreciate that question. It's a great question. Zach, you want to jump back in?
I want to jump in because there's a famous study, that I wrote about in the book, that took place in, I think it was Rome a few years ago. It was involving basketball players, not baseball players, but they took a video clip of a basketball player shooting free throws, and they zoomed in very closely, strictly to the fingertips of the player as the ball was released, and they froze the frame as soon as the ball left the player's fingertips. And they asked, a group of active professional basketball players whether or not, from that image, whether or not they could judge if the shot went in. And they also asked, a variety of coaches and journalists and ex-players the same question. From that image, did the ball go in? And it turned out that the active professional players were exceedingly better than the other groups in being able to judge whether or not the ball went in. There's just something about active expertise in that, that task, that element of your sport that, it sets that athlete apart from even experts who have been, away from the game for a little bit of time. It's really interesting. And so it says something, I think, about active expertise and just this perceptual ability that some of these athletes have that, a lot of times we can't put a finger on. We can't quite say, what is it? Why is it that, David Beckham seems to know where all his players are on the field at the same time without even looking, or Steph Curry can throw behind the back passes and on a fast break without missing stride. There's something about being an active expert in your field that sets you apart. But anyway,
on that note,
Jason, I want to get
on that note, Zach, I will put in the chat for everybody now. So look to the side. I'll put in a link to Zach's book, Performance Cortex, and you can get it directly from that link. It should take you to Amazon. You can either get the audio. Many people have told me they've listened to you, Zach, or the book, more so than read you. So you can get both from that link there.
My voice. Not my voice.
Oh, someone's voice.
Someone's.
You got,
yeah.
you got the Waze voice, right? Or maybe Google Maps, one of the two.
Should have had you read it, Jason, actually. That would have been much more entertaining. I want to get back to, this time off that we've had from baseball, and you were talking about, the difficulties in trying to get, assessments of guys while they're, and athletes while they're not playing, actively. Because it, reminded me about, there's an interesting concept that I wrote about and kind of researched in the course of writing my book about. It's called the warm-up decrement, or the decrement, if you want to be fancy about it. And it's this idea, it's kind of this question, why is it that we need to warm up? Why do our muscles, is it our muscles, is it what's going on that requires us every day to take batting practice over and over again? And why can't we just suit up and get ready to play, walk right out? I mean, if you want to look at, a lot of people make comparisons to robotics, and neuroscience is a lot of crossover with robotics. If you were to design a robot three-point shooter or a robot hitter, you could just turn it on at any time and be able to hit. Why do we need this whole warm-up protocol? And there's an entire, apparatus around training and tuning up for a game or for a scenario. And it's really not anything to do with the muscles. I mean, they've done research on this, and you could kind of effectively, and they've studied this, you could sit in the locker room in the clubhouse and warm up your muscles, with heating pads or whatever, but you'd get out on the field and you'd stink, even if you played the night before, there'd something be missing. And you know, the brain is in fact so delicate in what, you know, it's taking in at all times as you're walking around, as you're, you know, staring out into the stands. You know, that, I mean, if you just to bring it back to like a basketball scenario, I mean, you know, you have LeBron James can go to the bench for a few minutes and then he'll come back in the game, but we almost have this expectation, well, he's going to miss a couple shots, right? He's rusty, right? We have this term, rust. Like, what does that mean? And so there's a cognitive, it has to do with how your brain is responding to what's around you. The stimuli that it's picking up as it's looking around is very different than the task-oriented concentration that's needed to focus on you know, the sport that you're playing and the scenarios that you're playing in. And so how do you harness that? How do you train for that rather than letting everything else kind of bombard you? Is a question that I think researchers are trying to answer, and I think is an important question, and one that needs further research. But Jason and Jordan, this is a kind of a long-winded question, a way of asking you, how do you think that this long layoff of the spring and now into the summer is going to impact hitters as we move ahead here? I mean, you know, they had a spring training that was cut short, obviously, and then nothing. And now we're talking about 3 weeks maybe of summer camp. Is that going to be enough, do you think, to get these hitters ready to go at opening day? Or are we going to see a lot of hitters really struggle because of that warm-up decrement that I just talked about?
Right. Yeah, Jordan, you wanna chime in first?
I'll take a try and predict the future. That's always a good place to be.
It's recorded, so it'll be
Yeah.
posterity.
So my guess is we probably won't see much of a downgrade in their hitting. Just because I think the pitching and the hitting will probably both be in some weird way. Some players are going to be way better. Some players are going to be way worse. And it really depends on what everyone was doing during the break. I bet there are some hitters who have been training nonstop the whole time. And they found, you know, people they work with or trainers they work with that they've probably worked every single day because that's their job and that's what they want to do. And then there's going to be other players who weren't doing that. And I wouldn't be surprised if we're able to see those differences rather than, you know, rather than seeing sort of a group level, all the batters are probably not going to be able to catch up to the pitchers. That would be my guess. But I do find that same idea of how to warming up the body, but also warming up the brain at the same time, very fascinating. And it's one of the reasons why we started uHIT and created the product, in that Jason and I always knew, you know, one, there's something interesting going on in a batter's brain when they're trying to hit, and it's really difficult. And the best batters must have something different about how they're making this decision than the other batters. It just has to be that case, right? And so, how do we figure out what that is? And sort of that's the genesis of all this. And so, as we've been going through this process, one of the things Jason and I really saw early on is that the batting practice that all players take sort of before a game is sort of soft toss. It's really just warming up the physical muscles. It has nothing to do with warming up the mental muscles. And one of the things we've always been trying to say is less of that just sort of warming up the muscles. That's fine. Warm up those muscles as much as you can. But you also have to train on or warm up your mental muscles, because you're not seeing a soft toss of 70 miles an hour when you're in the game. You're seeing, 95 on the paint, and you better be ready for it. And if you're not practicing that before the game, you're not ready for it at the first pitch. And so that's been something we've really wanted to get at as a training tool for the professionals, and trying to get that across, because that is the warm up of the brain that you need to see. And if you're able to do that on the bus, on the plane, get those reps in when you can't, because a lot of the time, even a pitching machine doesn't necessarily give you exactly what you need. You need that difference in pitches. You need that different repertoire to really train these things. You can't have the pitching machine. So that warm up has always been interesting for me too. So I
Yeah.
agree with you, Zach.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'd second that. You know, when Jordan and I were first working with the White Sox, Chicago White Sox, we did some players on the AAA team in Charlotte before a real game during the season, and we were kind of blown away, like the kind of warm-ups that they were doing and how much swinging practice they were doing. Not batting practice, swinging practice. So hitting off of a tee, fine. Soft toss, fine. Live BP out on the field, right? All these things that are part of the culture, I think, in baseball and in softball of how to do a warm-up. You know, in many respects, you know, kind of like Jordan was saying, it's like that's not the kind of stimulus your brain is going to get on the vision side, the visual cognitive side, when you get out to the field, right? You're not going to see 60-mile-per-hour meatballs that are thrown from a screen right in front of the mound, right? And you're not going to be hitting a ball right off of a tee, right? You're going to have a pitcher that's, you know, changing speeds on you. You're going to have crowd noise. Well, this season, they're not going to have crowd noise. But generally, you have crowd noise. You got situations. You got a runner on base. You got two runners on base. You got an umpire who's got an outside corner that goes into the dugout, right? You got all these factors going on that are not simulated when you're doing your warm-up. And there was I think a really nice piece done last Memorial Day weekend by I think it was Joe Lemire in New York Times, and he covered Jeff Albert, who had been with the Houston Astros, now he's with the Cardinals, and several others, and talking about warm-ups and like doing real simulated batting practice, not swinging practice, right? And the importance of it to simulate from a brain level, like what you have to do when you're up at the plate. And one of the things that, you know, when we first started working with the White Sox, we were there just to do our EEG measurements and tell them things about their players. But pretty soon it developed into the director of player development prioritizing us using the product or them using the product on players who were injured, high priority prospects who had injured themselves, right? And they didn't want them to lose a whole season worth of not seeing pitches in their march to the major league level. And so, you know, the virtual or game remote for simulated at bats became instrumental for two prospects in the White Sox organization. One of them is Jake Berger. And so that aspect of how do you get the warm-ups that you need for your brain before you actually get out there is something Jordan and I have always, thought about and thought can be done better. And like a player like Evan Mendoza in the Cardinals organization, who used uHIT starting in 2018 when we began our work with the Cardinals, and then continued to use it since then. He was a player who figured out, hey, I've got a problem where I'm doing what he called a Jeter dance, Derek Jeter dance out of the box when he sees pitches on the inner part of the plate, because he couldn't really tell whether that pitch was going to land over the inner part of the plate or if it was going to hit him. And so he was jumping out of the box. And he noticed this. He was aware enough, he was self-aware enough of his performance on the field in the game to recognize what he has to do in his training before the game, his warm-up, right, in order to not jump out of the box like that in the game. So he actually used uHIT specifically for that aim. He used our zone training to specifically work on pitches on that inner part of the plate. And we can show a little bit of that if we don't run out of time tonight. But it is part of what you get with the pro player in uHIT. And even we program that for you based on what your strengths and weaknesses are as we measured in the AI training. So with Evan, he was actually doing those warm-ups tailored to what he saw out on the field. It was his own kind of self-guided process of using uHIT. But he was an anomaly. And I tell you, he was an anomaly this way. He's the only baseball player I've met who was also studying aerospace engineering. He was drafted from North Carolina State and into the Cardinals organization. And he's the only player I've met who is also an aerospace engineering student. But we realized that, hey, we got to give that same level. We've got to give that same level of warm-up, specific warm-up to every player, right? So that they can be just as ready going into the box as Evan was after he used uHIT for 2 or 3 weeks. And he said, I started noticing a difference. I was staying in there on pitches on the inner part of the plate, or even better, I was able to recognize them fast enough and turn on them. So that tells you that he's applying his warm-up to when he gets out on the field. And that's something we get asked about all the time with uHIT, right? How does playing a video game make you better on the field? Well, the way it does it is our job. We figured it out. You just have to kind of trust us on it to get started. But don't just trust us. You trust Evan Mendoza from the Cardinals. You trust Andy Young. You trust Eric Thames. You trust many others and the thousands of other players around the world, really, that are benefiting from this kind of approach of playing a video game, so to speak. But it's a warm-up for how your brain will need to operate when you're out on the field. It doesn't look like it because you're not swinging a bat, right? But that's kind of what one of my favorite coaches in this area, Rob Cruz, calls the invisible mechanics of hitting. It's not the visible mechanics. It's not the skeletal muscular. It's not what you're doing with your swing. It's not whether you're rolling over or you got some, launch angle type of your swing. No, those are the visible mechanics. Everybody can see those with their eyes. These are the invisible mechanics that you can only really measure with a tool like uHIT. And so I think that's actually a good segue to the follow-up question that we did have from Warren in the sidebar here, which was commenting on the idea that many athletes, coaches, and parents don't know that the visual cognitive system can be trained, first of all, and that you should train it, right? Just like you train, you lift weights for skeletal muscular strength, right? You run laps for cardiovascular strength, right? You eat well, right? Nutrition, and you build in recovery time to your rotations of your pitchers, and even for your hitters. I mean, you start seeing a lot of injuries that are just from overuse. Jake Berger from the White Sox, I suspect, may have avoided that injury that kept him out of the 2018 season if he were swinging less. And, there are many other players that, I think we can help really with this, make their swings more efficient by having them swing less and bat more. So I think the point that Warren brings up, how can we build this category of visual cognitive performance and its importance to first measure it and then to be able to train it, I don't really know a simple answer for that, Warren. I think communication, however that's done, is one of the most important ways, and that's a really tough nut to crack. It's brought us from bringing an EEG cap with wires all over the place, a little green dot, like Zach said, on the screen that looks like it jumps at you, right, like an insect, right? I mean, it's brought us from that, which measured the same thing that uHIT measures, but it's brought us to uHIT now, where we've added a pitcher, we got a stadium, we got a bases, we got everything, right? And we've got the rotation on the ball, we got the spin on the ball, right? We've got the trajectory, we got the right batter's box, the left batter's box. In the new beta app that is going to be released this Saturday on baseball, you're going to be able to move your head around on your phone. So as you move your phone in space, you will be looking like you're looking through VR goggles at different parts of the stadium, heightening that level of simulated at bat even more right on your phone. So all those tricks, tools, mechanisms, they're all ways of communicating the importance of the visual cognitive. And it's very tough to do. I mean, we've had some modest success with it, I think, but we have a long ways to go as well. And I assume even in the kind of work that you guys are doing on the more fundamental skills of cognition, where it's not immediately applicable. It's like, why am I following a dot on a screen? Why am I, hitting for red and not, or hitting for green and not hitting for red? What does that have to do with my baseball swing, right? I think when it's even further away from the comfort level, it makes it even tougher to get over that communications barrier. So that's something that we're working on all the time. And these kinds of seminars, the uHIT Academy has been tremendously valuable in that. We do have a uHIT Academy page, and our website was revamped recently. So I'm going to put in the chat right now for both the baseball and the softball, a link that you can follow to go to our uHIT baseball site. And that is a special link for folks from the July 9 seminar tonight. And for our softball folks out there, I'm going to drop that link right now in the chat as well, where off of these two links, you can get to the information that you need about the uHIT Academy. Interviews with coaches. We've interviewed Susie Williamson out in Virginia. We've interviewed Rob Cruz from Complete Game. We've interviewed Matt Lyle from Fresno State, formerly from the White Sox. We've interviewed Bruce Yari, formerly of the Cincinnati Reds, still actively playing professionally in this weirdo universe we're in right now, where there's no such thing as minor league baseball this season. So all of those links to the uHIT Academies are available from the link I just sent you in the chat window. But at those links, you also find a lot more information about uHIT baseball, uHIT softball, and the various tools we've been talking about tonight to further your training in this area.
I just want to add, my own comment here on Warren's question too, because this question about why don't most athletes and coaches and parents know about the visual cognitive system and the role that it plays in athletics and skill. I didn't know. I covered baseball and sports my whole life. I played sports, and I thought that before I wrote this book, I thought that what made a great baseball hitter was his vision or steroids. I thought that why NBA basketball players got drafted was because of their wingspan and their height, and why NFL players, just how NFL players distinguish themselves was because they ran a 4.3 in the 40 at the NFL Combine, right? We still do the NFL Combine every year, and people watch it, and that's how they assess future players and so on. And so there's this real misconception and lack of education about what's really going on, what's going on underneath the hood of these fantastic engines that we watch on the field and on the court every day. And for me, the realization came when I saw the two front runners for the 2017 American League MVP were Aaron Judge and Jose Altuve. Aaron Judge, who's 6'7" and 285 pounds, and Jose Altuve, who's 5 foot nothing, right? Now, if you're a scout trying to, help a baseball team and find future players, and your boss says, find us the next Aaron Judge, what are you going to do? I mean, how do you use that information? Do you just only look at guys who are 6'7" with huge muscles? Or do you only look at trying to find the next guy who's Jose Altuve, who's a shorter, maybe not athletically too prominent, but, has something else there? I think the important thing is trying to figure out what is it that these two guys have similarly, beyond just their vision. There's something else going on that makes them special together, and it must be kind of the same thing, right? Mm-hmm. They do that very specific thing, that this one decision that I talked about, that one interaction, swing or don't swing, they do that extraordinarily well. So, I think I wouldn't want to be a scout right now. I mean, it's very tough. I don't know. Well, I guess it's easier now with companies like deCervo trying to help you out. It used to be, but it's a tough thing, and I think that there continues to be a real misconception about athletes and athleticism and skill, and what it means to be skilled. We still don't really have a great answer to that question. I think it's often credited to the muscles and the joints and ligaments and the physical things that we can see and kind of measure to this point really well. But clearly there's something else going on.
Yeah. Well, and I'll throw in on that too, Zach, because I remember actually, I think from the New York Times article about the book, there you had the picture, I think, of Altuve standing next to Judge when one of them was on second base. And it was, it was like, look at these two guys. They don't look like, they could have anything in common, but they're both great hitters. And it was, that kind of, again, that visual that tells you they should be different, but underneath the hood, there's actually a lot more that's similar. It's something that I think for us going forward is really kind of a goal to, take the player that you don't know about right now, take the next Andy Young, right? I mean, he was a good hitter before, but he wasn't $5 million of a hitter when we first started working with him, right? And when he got traded for Paul Goldschmidt, he became $5 million of a hitter. When we first imaged Justin Turner in 2015, no one really knew who Justin Turner was outside of the Mets who traded him and the Orioles who traded him too. And that then, we measured him and we was like, whoa, he's really good at recognizing pitches. And he's doing it when he's got to. His brain is recognizing it at that precise point. That's one of the most efficient places to do it. And he did it in that first session that we did with him back before we were uHIT, back before we were deCervo. And then you fast forward a couple of years and it's like, wow, he is the World Series MVP. Wow, he is one of the great power hitters in the game right now. So, those are the kind of players that we're really helping the most. The players who want to get better and not will try anything, but, are willing to work. And, one thing I hear a lot when we do work with professional teams, particularly in the US, is about what they call makeup. And what makeup is one of those things like, when they say a guy's got good stuff, it's this broad category that means a lot of things. But makeup, what they're talking about, what we see, how it impacts our work is when you have a player who is dedicated enough to, he needs to hit better on the inner part of the plate. He needs to see the slider better on the outer part of the plate. And he's willing to use a tool that is not like anything else he's doing. It's not swinging more reps in the cages. It's not doing more more reps on the pitching machine, but it's actually working that inner part of the plate or the sliders away. Those are the players with that kind of makeup. It's not drive. It's not really determination. It's just like, I need to get better. Kind of like, I don't know if anybody watched The Last Dance, the ESPN series on the Bulls in the 90s. I grew up in Chicago in the 90s, so I grew up with all that stuff. But like everything we thought about Michael Jordan was even more so from that documentary, hearing about his need to do it better and his need to win. And that's really something that we've seen players who have that kind of drive and parents who want to instill that value in their kids and coaches who want to instill that value in their players. We've seen them be really successful with uHIT, whether it's in the United States, whether it's in Dominican Republic, whether it's in Korea, whether it's in Canada. And so that's something, I think that's another variable here that, sometimes gets overlooked in terms of what makes Aaron Judge and, Jose Altuve so great. There's also this makeup element that they need to do it better too. And that's a main driver to being able to, perform better on the field as well. And that's not something that, you can really ignore in all this. There has to be that will, that desire to get better and to use tools that will help you do that. So we had a few other questions, by the way, Zach, that popped in the chat. Did you get a couple of them?
Yeah. Let's see here.
And we'll try to do a couple more questions and then start wrapping up, because I know people are probably hitting dinner time and other things like that.
Yeah, let's do this one. Jason or Jordan, pre-EEG and post-EEG, what kind of changes do you see after training?
So Jordan, do you want to jump in on that?
So pre-EEG meaning like the first assessment, and then
And then the follow-up.
post-EEG meaning what when we do the training. Is that what you mean, Zach?
Yeah, that's
Sure.
how I'm reading it. Yeah, I think in the
Okay.
talking about our AI training.
So what we generally see is the idea. What we're looking for in the EEG assessments is getting a sense of what we can't get from the just physical responses, and the only physical response we can really record there is pressing a button, tapping the screen, and getting a reaction time and how accurate you are at picking up pitches. So when we do the EEG, what we're actually picking up on is your decision process leading up to your physical reaction. So what we're able to pick up on is, are you mentally prepared to see the upcoming pitch? So while the pitcher is in his windup, are you getting ready mentally to see the next pitch? And we one of the things we see there is start with a preparedness rating, and as they go through uHIT, we see that rating get better and better and better. So that's a simple one that we see, as in they get in the repetition, they get a sense that they need to prepare. There's a mindset that they have to be ready to make this decision. And then as they train, that preparedness gets better. So that's one thing. The next thing we look at in the EEG is before they press, but when the pitch is released, but before they make a decision, what is going on up in the head? And so what we find is certain areas of the brain will fire first, and then preceded by other areas. And what we're trying to key in on is what timing in relation to the pitch being released to then the decision being made and the physical decision being shown. Can we pick up on that timing, and what does that say of that player? So on which pitches are they able to make the decision really fast, or is that on fastballs, curveballs, or sliders? Is that on certain areas of the zone? Are they making their decision 10, 15, 20 milliseconds faster than in other areas? That gives us a sense of what areas, let's say, in part of the zone to target, but also what types of pitches that the player is having trouble picking up on at a neural level. So they might be accurately the same. They might be answering the same with the same accuracy, but we could pick up on that they're picking up on fastballs much faster than curveballs, but even with off-speed pitches, that they're picking up on sliders a little bit faster than they're picking up on curveballs. So understanding the differences in what they're seeing and in the time it takes for them to see it really helps us hone in on what areas to target as we do the AI training. Now, after the AI training, what we want to see is those decision gaps getting smaller and smaller and smaller, so that they make their decisions as fast as possible while maintaining their accuracy. Now, it's super easy to tell everyone to make your decision faster, but what will happen is you'll make your decisions worse, right? Your accuracy will go down in guessing balls and strikes, or what pitch type it is. But what we're working on here is getting those decisions faster while maintaining that accuracy, or even increasing that accuracy. So trying to buck the speed accuracy trade-off that is inherent in any decisions made.
Right. Yeah, no, there was another question that came up in the chat here is from Mike. He asked, what kind of research, this is kind of on the heels of what we're talking about with, pre-post changes, stuff like that, whether it's EEG or even doing it through the phone. What kind of research has been done on the effectiveness of pitch recognition programs like uHIT? That's a great question, because I think, especially the way that's phrased, pitch recognition programs, uHIT being one of them, I think is an important thing to point out. There are many other programs out there. There's GameSense, there's S2 Cognition, which does something a little bit different, and there are other variants that are out there. Mainly in baseball, some are in softball, but in our case, we have a little bit of a different pedigree and product development than some of the other programs that are out there, primarily because we first started working with professional players, and we had the opportunity and really the luxury to do that and the luck, really, of being able to first measure professional players. And it's not really because there's this common misconception, I think, amongst non-neuroscience, non-cognitive neuroscience folks, that if you measure the professionals, you can just tell everybody what they have to shoot for, right? And that they're going to be down here and they just got to shoot for up here. Just like, you know, Mike Trout can hit the ball however far he can hit it, and you won't be Mike Trout until you can hit the ball that far, right? But it's not on that same kind of scale when it comes to cognitive performance, especially when it comes to being able to recognize pitches in the zone, out of the zone, curveballs, sliders, fastballs, etc. We see really good hitters sometimes on the field, or I should say very good power hitters on the field do pretty poorly sometimes on a uHIT assessment. Why is that? Well, it's because they may be good power hitters. They may hit 25, 30 homers in a year, but they'll also have a ton of strikeouts, and they'll have like an 80%, you know, swing and miss rate sometimes out of the zone. So there are players like that that we ran into, for instance, on the Dodgers. The same day we looked at Justin Turner, we looked at another player who is a hot prospect coming up to the major league level that year, who eventually made the all-star team because he had such a great first half. But we did our measurement of him in spring training and weren't really impressed. We kind of thought we made a mistake when he made the all-star team that year. But ever since then, the pitchers at the major league level found his weaknesses and started consistently exploiting them. And he's gotten a little better over time. But just to give you a sense, Justin Turner, remember, he was the one who did really well in pitch recognition. This other player, the prospect, not so well, really not so well. And their salary comparisons were kind of like this at the time, 2015. Since then, Justin Turner has been like here, and this other player has been like here. So, and that's really a reflection, actually, more so of what kind of run production they've been doing on the field. Because actually, this player is an incredible athlete. He looks like a ball player, right? He's fast, he can run, right? And he's athletic, and he can make great plays in the field. But the hitting is not where Justin Turner's is. And so that's something that, you know, we have a leg up on in terms of the other pitch recognition programs that nobody else does. And I would encourage you, Mike, and I'd encourage others on this call and the, you know, hundreds, thousands, maybe others who will watch this video to go to the uHIT Baseball website, deCervo.com/uHIT Baseball. You see in the top corner of my screen here, so that you can learn more about that kind of research that we've done, showing effectiveness of a pitch recognition program like uHIT, specifically uHIT, not another kind of pitch recognition program. Because what we do is it's not just the logo. It is specifically measuring how the brain recognizes pitch in and out of the zone, how it recognizes different types of pitches, and then we use that information to help you do it better. So you'll see impact of before to after, or before to during using uHIT on OBP. That's on-base percentage, is one of the strongest correlates we see of traditional metrics on the field. Slugging percentage is in a close second. Both of those metrics, though, are generally dependent on getting on base, however you're going to do it, right? So it's flexible to the range of different types of decisions you have to make at different counts and different game situations to not just hit the ball hard, but to get on base, to hit the ball where you need to hit it when you need to hit it, to not swing when you need to not swing. All of those things translate into on-base percentages. And being able to work with professional teams in the early stages, we actually had the benefit of being able to look at what they call their plate discipline data. So all the TrackMan type data, all the PitchFX type data, now StatCast data showing this ball was in the zone and they swung and hit it at a launch angle of 25 degrees. This angle was out of the zone and they swung and missed, right? This pitch was out of the zone and they swung and missed, right? Those are items that we were able to track on, you know, thousands of pitches level across hundreds of players, and able to validate things like, hey, as your OZ takes get better and uHIT, shocking, your OZ takes also get better on the field. You start taking pitches out of the zone. OZ takes more and uHIT, you start doing the same thing on field. You do more pitches in uHIT, you start seeing your zone contact rate go up, right? these are kind of things that we see after 500, 1,000, sometimes up to 4,000 pitches played on uHIT over the course of a season. And those are under even less effective training protocols than we have in place now. So, so Mike, I hope that helps answer that question. And of course, the link that we did put in the chat, I'll make sure that I drop it in the chat now again, so that you do have that. We'll show you on the uHIT Baseball website where you can find that info right on the front page. That is in the chat already, and I'm actually going to drop in for you, Mike, and for everyone, a link to the player options you can use to get started right now in uHIT Baseball. And for anyone who does go there from the seminar, you will get, and it's within these next 24 hours, you will get 6 months free of Pro Player. So we've got 3 options up there for you to get Pro Player. You can get the AI training, which is built on top of that, or you can add in the simulated at-bats using our game remote, so that you can connect uHIT, stand in your batter's box, your hitting position in your living room, right? Make it much more immersive that way, and connect really your physical side, the visible mechanics, to these invisible mechanics of how to hit better. So that's really something that you can explore on your own. And I think everybody's gotten all of those, next steps in terms of things they can do to further their own research and implement some of these things now in their training, in their coaching, in their parenting, and in their playing themselves.
Jason, I'll just comment quickly on the research, on the question here from Mike, because, and I'm speaking not as a scientist, obviously, but as a journalist. I think where certain, brain gaming companies have gotten into trouble, it's generally, I'm not talking about sports specific, but generally like the Lumosity type, where they've dealt with some issues about, whether or not they were deceptive in their marketing and things like that. Is that I think they were a little too generalized. It seems that saying that a game like Tetris, kind of that sort of simulation, is going to, make you, remember things better and make you into an athlete or something like that. It doesn't really work that way. The simulations and the programs, there has to be a certain amount of efficacy with the task that you're actually trying to bolster, that you're trying to train and improve, because the brain just can't be generalized so broadly. It has to be focused on one specific thing, because of what Jason and Jordan were talking about earlier. Picking up, especially in a sporting scenario, picking up the cues, the very subtle cues, but they're still cues about what a pitcher might be doing, is key. I mean, that's the whole thing, and that's what these experts are able to do. That's what batting practice has given them, all that training and all that work. Seeing the ball out of a pitcher's hand is telling their brain something every time they step in the batter's box. And so, that's where I think deCervo has done a nice job, and has improved a lot along the way since I started writing about them, in tailoring their simulation toward that in-game scenario. And I don't know about other programs, but that's really what you're aiming for, is that as close to the real thing as possible, because you want to try and pick up you want to try and train the brains to be able to pick up on those cues.
Yep.
So.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that's a great, place to kind of button it up. I think it was a great hour and a half here, almost 90 minutes with everybody. And I think we have some, concrete kind of next steps that are out there for you. We do have the link to Zach's book, The Performance Cortex. You can have on audio, you can get on Kindle, and you can get the good old physical copy, which is a great beach read right now. And you do have links directly to the uHIT baseball and the uHIT softball websites that have newly been remade with a ton of info, useful videos, helpful how-tos, interviews with coaches about how they're doing pitch recognition, not just with uHIT, but with other tools, integrating what we do with visible swing mechanics. So connecting the invisible with the visible. And then for anyone on the call tonight, for these next 24 hours, if you use that link that we sent you of the player options to get a AI training, with the simulated at bat, that you can do this kind of work not just on a phone, but at your living room TV, at your flat screen TV, get some reps in there, minimal impact in terms of swinging, right? Minimal impact on the body. We will give you an extra 6 months of Pro Player free as a thank you. So everyone should okay, we got a RC says, thanks, I'm halfway through the book. Really a great book. There you go. I think Zach did that review on Amazon too. So thank you. That's good. You've got these tools. I mean, we've talked about the science tonight, and Zach is really, I mean, one of the reasons when he first contacted us in October 2014, we had just come off an article where we told the journalist all these things about how this works, and they kind of screwed up a few things. And I told Zach, I said, listen, we'd love to do something with you, but if we tell you something's important for how this works, it's because it's important. It's not because we're trying to sell more. It's because it's important that people understand how this works more so than they buy it. Like, it's important they buy it because that's how they use it. But it's more important to us at the time, and still is, that there's this educational component to uHIT, and that's really a central theme to these uHIT Academy Zoom seminars. And so we just want to make sure you have the tools and the information that you need to now go forward, get your AI training with simulated at bat, or kind of ease into it with Pro Player. But for the baseball folks out there, keep an eye out on your apps that you have downloaded on uHIT, because we are releasing a major update, a really incredible update on this Saturday. Some people have already registered for that beta app experience. It's still open to you if you do want to do it. You can check your email and see if you got that invitation from us. But everybody will have access to it very soon, and we're really excited about the kind of VR that we're going to be putting right on your phone, and a really engaging way of doing your training now with uHIT. You'll start to see it's going to really, I mean, we're turning up the knob on gamification, but what we're really seeing in the early testers of this, we've already done it with hundreds of people in our kind of most dedicated users. We've really seen some great results in terms of them getting better quantitatively at recognizing pitches and making better decisions. So we have another thank you from Down Under from Mark Armstrong. Thanks for the great opportunity to understand how uHIT works and the chance to hear from Zach. You're a celebrity in Australia now, Zach. So everybody, I want to thank everybody for getting on. I want to thank Zach Schonbrun, Performance Cortex, of course, my partner in all of this, Jordan Maraskin, and everyone else. We will have a video of this available in the coming days, so keep an eye out for your email, and we will be able to send you these links so that you have some calls to action ready on hand to implement this stuff with your kids, with your players, or even with your own training. So we'll make sure we get that to you in the coming days. And this video will be available on our YouTube channel, on deCervo's YouTube channel, where I encourage you all to subscribe so that you can get the newest uHIT Academy videos as they come out, and also see some of the previous ones where we talked to a minor league baseball player in the Reds organization, or where we talked on the softball side to A.J. Andrews, professional player in softball, former LSU star. So that and many other great topics are available to you on uHIT Academy, on our website, and on our YouTube channel. So stay tuned for emails on that. I really appreciate everybody reaching out, joining us tonight, and signing off from New York. And thank you, everybody from across the world, across the country. And thank you, Zach, for writing a fantastic book. And we look forward to more from you.
Thank you, Jason. Great. Good seeing everybody. Thank you.
All right. Have a good night, everyone.
Thanks from Sydney, Australia. Thank you.